Hey guys, what's going on? So today we're going to be taking a look at some more prospect rankings for the 2023 NHL Draft, this time from TSN's own Bob McKenzie. So McKenzie is one of the foremost draft guys, I guess, at least in terms of his rankings. They're usually pretty accurate as to how players actually get drafted, although of course this is very, very early in the year. You guys are probably familiar with that kind of stuff already, so let's just jump right into the rankings. So he has a big written out thing here. Oops, spoilers. Yeah, he also has a shortened version for the top 16 here at the bottom, which includes pictures and their stats and stuff like that. It's a little bit easier to digest, especially in video form. So that's what we're going to be taking a look at here. And of course, at number 1, he has Conor Bedard. He has their statistics from last year: 51 goals in 62 games in WHL, 100 points. I mean, that's pretty ridiculous numbers for a draft -1 player, and a very young draft -1 player at that. July 17th birthday, 2005. So he's not that far away from being a 2024 eligible. In fact, I believe the cutoff is in August, if I'm not mistaken. So it's like a month away from being a 2024 eligible. So he's almost a double underager, putting up that type of production in the WHL. That's pretty crazy. Just got named captain, of course, of the Regina Pats, youngest captain in team history. And that's just another feather in his cap. You know, he's the best prospect that is not NHL affiliated in the world right now, in my opinion. I'm sure a lot of people would agree with that. Some people might think it could be like somebody like Aaron Kiwi-Haru, perhaps, or perhaps that one American kid who's available in 2024. Anyways, it's Conor Bedard at 1. That's about it. Let's move on to number 2, where he has Matvei Michkov. So this is in opposition. That's not quite the word I'm going for, but I think you understand what I'm saying. It's different than the McKenzie's list we took a look at on Wednesday. That I'm pretty sure they had Fantilli at 2. Here we have Michkov at 2, and as I said in that video, I believe Michkov is the second best player in this draft class. So he has his KHL numbers here: 13 games played, 2 goals, 5 points, and a +2. I mean, that's extremely impressive numbers. It's a relatively small sample size, yes, but for a draft -1 player to be playing in the KHL at all is pretty special. I mean, there's a couple of draft eligible players that are playing in the KHL right now this year. Mikheyev being one of them, and that alone is impressive enough just to be playing in the KHL as a draft eligible player. But for Michkov to do that last year, it's pretty special. He very well might be at the very least, the best Russian goal scorer since Alexander Ovechkin. Now, I'm not saying he's as good as Ovechkin. That is yet to be seen. He's a very different style of player than Ovechkin. Ovechkin, of course, is more of like a power forward with just a crazy powerful shot. Michkov is more of like a skilled, speedy kind of guy who also is a little bit more of a playmaker, maybe. I think his playmaking is a little bit underrated, but he's a very, very gifted goal scorer as well. And as we move on to number 3, we have Adam Fantilli here, and I just think Michkov his ceiling is significantly higher than Fantilli for my money, and that's what really creates the separation there between those two guys for me. That being said, Adam Fantilli is a fantastic prospect as well. These top 3 guys are all really, really insane prospects. Any of these guys would have gone first overall easily in the 2022 draft, in my opinion. Now, Fantilli is actually kind of an interesting prospect because he's one of the older guys in this draft class, which it's not that I don't like older prospects, it's just that I prefer younger prospects. They tend to outperform their draft position, and you have a little bit more runway with them in terms of their development. That being said, though, Fantilli had one of the best USHL seasons of all time last year, in my opinion. In fact, I did a video on that, so I will put it in a card up above in case you want to check that one out. But, you know, maybe stick around for the end of this one first. But anyways, Fantilli absolutely deserving of a top 3 spot. Now 4, Bob has Braden Yeager, so this is interesting. Yeager is a player that I like a lot. I really do like Braden Yeager. I think he's a fantastic goal scorer. Good playmaker as well. Bob here describes him as a well-balanced offensive forward who can score it and make plays with equal adeptness. I don't quite agree with that. I think he is a better goal scorer than he is a playmaker. That being said, his playmaking is a significant enough threat that it does at times create more space for himself because the opposition does have to respect the pass, and that kind of helps you with scoring goals. Of course, having more space generally makes it easier to score more goals. But yeah, other than that, he's one of the best players in this draft class. I will go in further into depth on all these guys as the season goes on. But for now, gifted goal scorer, yes. Good playmaker, and I probably wouldn't have him this high. He's a borderline top 5 guy, definitely top 10. I can't remember if I actually have him in my top 5 or not at the moment. But if I don't, he's close. He's probably like 6 or 7. So 4 isn't a huge stretch for him, but there's definitely a few guys that I would put here ahead of him. One of them being the player that Bob has at 5 in Leo Carlson. Carlson is fast. He a good skater, and he is a good stick handler. He's skilled in general, has a good shot. I mean, every player that's going to be going top 16 in a draft class is pretty skilled, right? Other than that, I haven't seen him play too much, but from what I have seen from him, I believe that his skating is good and his ceiling is really high, and those are kind of the things that are going to bump prospects up my list, especially early on when I don't have as much information on these guys. Now at number 6, he has Calum Ritchie, and this is a player that is a really good prospect to have. I don't think he deserves to be in the top 10 in this draft class. I think that quite simply there are a lot more players that are more skilled than he is at this point, at the very least. We'll see at the end of the season, right? He could really break out. You never know. But he's big. He's physical. He can play kind of a pesty game. He's well-rounded. But for me, I value skating and skill the most, and he isn't bad in either of those categories. I just think there's plenty of players, like the one listed right after him here, that beat him in those categories. So now at 7, dang, I keep spoiling the next guy. My bad. Anyways, at 7, he has Zach Benson. Benson is probably my favorite player to watch in this draft class. At least my favorite North American player to watch. He's just so creative with the puck on his stick. He has really good vision for passing lanes, really good at executing on those passes, even the difficult ones that a lot of other players would either A, wouldn't see, or B, would not attempt because they are too difficult for them. He has a pretty good shot too. My main criticism of him last year was that he wasn't using his shot enough. But this year, I believe in the 4 preseason games he played, he had 4 shots on goal every single game. So I love to see that. He is small. He's listed here at 5'8.5", which is interesting. I feel like that's a bit unnecessary. Either list him at 5'8 or 5'9". I believe on Elite Prospects, he's actually listed at 5'10". So who truly knows exactly how tall he is, but he is small. So wherever he's listed, he's probably stretching it a little bit. So maybe 5'8.5" is a more accurate description of how tall he actually is. But I don't really care too much about size. I mean, unless you're like 5'3" or something ridiculous like that, if you have the skill, you're going to be ranked highly, for me at least. And for me, Zach Benson is a top 5 guy easily. One of the few players that I think could challenge Bedard, Fantilli, and Michkov for a top 3 spot in this draft class if everything goes right for him this season. All right, number 8, Bob has Cam Allen, which is interesting. I am not a huge Cam Allen fan, I'm not going to lie. I haven't seen, again, I have seen him more than some of the other guys in this list, so I shouldn't say I haven't seen him too much. I don't think the ceiling is quite there for Cam Allen. Bob describes him as a very strong two-way defenseman who can play any way you like it. I get that. I see that. He is relatively strong in every zone of the ice. However, I think there is a particular Russian defenseman in this draft class, for my money, that is a better two-way defenseman and has more offensive upside. And we will talk about him later in this video, I'm sure. Now, at 9, he has Dalibor Divorceki. So, Divorceki is actually one of the players that I have seen probably the least so far. But I know he has a good shot. Despite the fact that he only had 2 goals in 17 games last season, I'm not certain what league that is. I believe that would be from Allsvenskan. It might have been SHL. His team might have got demoted. I'm not certain. Either way, if it's Allsvenskan or SHL, scoring at all in that league, playing in those leagues at all as a draft -1 player is impressive. So 2 goals, 3 points, 17 games. Don't get fooled by that. He is one of the higher upside guys in this draft class for sure. And he has size to boot, which is going to, at the very least for NHL teams, probably make him a little bit more appetizing than potentially a guy like Zach Benson, who might be on a similar skill level or maybe even slightly higher skill level, but the size difference is so big. Oftentimes teams prefer players with size like Divorceki. All right, at number 10, Bob has Charlie Scramble. So I have seen Charlie Scramble. I can't remember where it was. I believe I said in an earlier video that I thought it was Linka. I believe I was corrected, and he did not play at the Linka. Perhaps it was the Summer World Juniors. I don't think it was that either. I can't remember where I've seen this guy play. All I remember, though, is that he didn't really impress me that much. I'm not going to lie. It's a small sample size for sure, and I didn't track any stats or anything for him. But he definitely didn't stand out as a guy who I think should be potentially a top 10 guy. For me, at least, this early in the season. Probably a guy that could move up into potentially a top 10 spot for me because he does have a strong reputation with other scouts, but that is yet to be seen. All right, number 11 is Nate Danielson. This is a player that I don't actually think I've seen. He plays for Brandon, so I did not see very much of Brandon last year. Maybe 2 or 3 games, and I was watching guys on the other team because Brandon was not very good last year. These are actually probably his stats from Brandon last year. If it was 57 points in 53 games, I'm not certain if that is from the WHL or not. It probably is if I had to guess, and that is actually really solid production for a underage player. So definitely a player that I'm very interested in. And just based on production like that, he's listed at 6'0" and a half, 179. That's a good size. So yeah, I'd be really interested in seeing him. Based off those numbers, definitely a guy I could see in my top 10 potentially. Take a shot every time I say potentially in this video, or maybe not. You might die if you do that. So maybe don't do that. All right, 12 is a very interesting player for me, and that is Ethan Gautier. This is a player I'm pretty sure I did see at the Hlinka Again, it might have been the World Juniors, but I'm pretty sure it was Linka, and he impressed me a lot. He strikes me as a guy who has really good hands, pretty good backhander too. Not the most valuable skill in the world to have, but it is good to have every shot in the book, and a backhander is certainly one of them. Good finisher as well, I think. He only had 18 goals in 65 games in the Q last year. I think he's going to improve on that pace a lot this season, and definitely a player, probably not in my top 10, but 12th overall, I think, is justified. He is probably just outside the top 10 for me right now. 13 is Edward Chalet. Now, this guy is underrated as heck, dude. I mean, I love this guy. This is another player that I saw at the Hlinka. Now, you could look at his stats, 39 games played, 42 goals, 89 points last season, and be like, who is this? Now, keep in mind that that was in the Czech U20 league, I believe. So, not a very good league, not a very high level of competition. Those numbers in themselves are not that impressive. However, at the Hlinka, he was the best player for Czechia, I think. One of the best players in the tournament, in my opinion. And he has his size as well. 6'1", only 163 pounds, but he will grow into that height, and he could even, add an inch or two by the time the draft rolls around. And he just has every skill that is useful in the offensive zone, I think he has. He has great hands. He's another guy with a great backhander, if I didn't mention that before. A good shot in general. Good positioning, at least in the offensive zone. I wasn't paying too much attention to defensive zone results for these players at the Hlinka, but one of the guys who I hadn't seen at all prior to the Hlinka, and I knew he had potential, kind of blew me away a little bit. Definitely. In fact, I think I have him in my top 10 in my most recent prospect rankings video. I'm not certain. If I don't, that's probably an oversight. He's definitely, at the very least, worthy of top 10 consideration. So again, 13, just outside the top 10. Not too bad of a placement for me. 14 is Otto Stenberg. Now, Stenberg is another guy that really stood out at the Hlinka, not to the extent of Chalet, but I thought he looked very fast. So I didn't do any time, blind to blind timings of any of these guys or anything like that, but he looked fast at least. And I think he has a pretty decent shot as well. 16 goals in 38 games last year. I'm not entirely certain what league that is. He's listed as Swedish J20, but that, I believe, is going to be the league he's anticipated in playing this year, not necessarily last year. So I'm not sure. I'm not certain if that is from the J20 league in Sweden last year or not. If it's not, though, it'd probably be the J18 league, which isn't great. So that wouldn't be that impressive. It's probably the J20 league, though. And yeah, he is a guy that I want to see a little bit more of before I get super excited, like I am with Chalet. But he's another guy that has good skating and a high ceiling, I think. Definitely, at the very least, a first rounder for me. All right, 15 is Colby Barlow. I'm not a huge fan of Colby Barlow. He is a well-rounded player, good two-way player, I would say. Has some skill, just not the highest ceiling guy, I don't think. He's probably a second-line winger in the NHL. I mean, it's really early to start making projections like that, but if I had to put money on one position that he's going to play in the NHL, it would be like a second-line left wing, or one role, I should say, like second-line left winger. He has some size, he has some skill. I don't think he has a crazy high ceiling. And for me, in this draft class, that probably lands you around the middle of the first round. So 15 is a reasonable placement for him, I think. Now 16, the last player in this ranking, is Casper Homonen, which is interesting. This is a player that I haven't seen I haven't specifically watched him at all. I have seen him play, but I wasn't specifically looking for him. I know that he's big, listed at 6'3", 207 here. That is quite the big boy for a 17-year-old. Playing in SM Liga, I believe that is the... is that the Finnish Junior League? Because the Pro League is just Liga, right? I'm pretty sure. I'm not entirely certain. I really would have to see him more before I can make any major conclusions about him. But my impression is that his ceiling is probably higher than some of the guys ahead of him, especially probably higher than a guy like Colby Barlow. But that is yet to be seen, for me at least. Now, he does have some honorable mentions here, which I do want to talk about. So he has Mikhail Gulyayev, Will Smith, Maxim Sturbach, and Matthew Wood. So I'm not really going to talk about Sturbach because I haven't seen him play too much. Wood, I think, is overrated. So I like that Bob has him not in the top 16 here. A lot of people would have him in the top 16. Personally, I think he's overrated. He had 45 goals last year in 46 games. That is not from the NCAA, right? These teams here are where they're playing next season. Those numbers are from the BCHL, okay, Junior A, in British Columbia. Now, that is the best Junior A league in BC, but it's still Junior A. It's not Major Junior. He wasn't playing in the WHL, and the level of competition, the difference in the level of competition between the WHL and the BCHL is significant. I do think the BCHL is one of the best Junior A leagues in Canada, but it still does not compete with the WHL in terms of the level of competition. So those numbers have to be taken with a grain of salt. I saw him play at Hlinka. He disappointed me. Quite frankly, he's been really hyped up. Everybody was like saying, well, you do have to take his numbers with a grain of salt, but trust me, he's really skilled. Saw him play, and he was getting a pretty good role. I believe he was playing on a line with Zach Benson, if I remember correctly, and he didn't stand out to me very much on that line. In fact, maybe it's just because he's playing next to Zach Benson, and Benson is super good, but it didn't stand out to me. A little bit disappointed, so I'm glad he's not in the top 16 here. Will Smith is a very interesting player, very skilled. I haven't seen him enough, though, personally, to probably have him in my top 16 either, but that is probably not the case with Bob, so a bit of an interesting omission there. At least I guess he is in the honorable mention category, so you can consider this like maybe 18th. You could have him ranked there if these are in order. But the most interesting guy on this list by far for me is, of course, Mikhail Gulyayev. I referenced him earlier if I didn't name him outright. And for my money, Gulyayev is the best defenseman in this draft class. I've watched 2 games of his already this year and I've done tracked stats for. One of them in the MHL, where his possession stats were really good. Well, his possession stats weren't fantastic, but they were decent. His transition stats were very good in the MHL. And then in the VHL game, his transition stats were also very good, perhaps even more impressive. He was also playing a significant role. He was playing both power play and penalty kill for the VHL, which is not super common for draft eligible players playing in that league. And I thought he was very, very effective in that game, especially in the defensive zone, which is interesting because he's often characterized as a offensive defenseman. Personally, I feel like he is effective enough in the defensive zone to be listed more as a two-way defenseman with really high offensive upside, I think. He's a good skater as well, really fast, and he actually got a call up to the KHL, so he's listed here playing for Omsk in the MHL. That is not the case. He is playing for Omsk in the KHL, and if he does get sent back down, it'll likely be back to the VHL, not the MHL. So he's going to be playing in a tough league for draft-eligible players to play in. To give you an idea, Gleb Trikasov, one of my favorite players from last season, also in the Omsk system, is playing in the VHL currently. In fact, Gulyayev got his first career VHL point on a assist on a Trikasov goal. That was a pretty cool moment. I haven't seen Gulyayev play in the KHL yet, though, but I did notice that he got like 14 minutes of ice time in one of his games recently, which is a ton for a draft eligible player in the KHL. A lot of times players like that will literally get like 2 shifts in the entire game, and they won't necessarily be bad. I mean, it's hard to judge a player off 2 shifts, but their coaches just staple them to the bench, really. It's quite frustrating. I don't really understand why it happens. Perhaps just to fill roster requirements, but either way, I think Gulyayev is better than Cam Allen and better than some of the other more prominent defensemen this draft class. It's not a great class for defensemen, but for me, for my money right now, Gulyayev is the best one there is. Alright, now that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you do believe it deserves a like, please do give it a like. Subscribe if you're new around here. That would really help me out. I would greatly appreciate it. But whatever you do, guys, be sure to have a nice day.